Welcome to the Trumpet of the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
Pretty soon, if Biden gets his way, the entire nation will be copying New York and requiring vaccination passports to be able to go to the grocery store. You'll have to be able to show your papers.
You want to talk about how this is automatically discriminating against the poor? Because it's not actually showing your papers. They keep it on their phone. What about people who can't afford a phone? What about people who don't have constant internet access?
So, don't know about constant internet access. But in regards to the phone, I'm pretty sure welfare covers that now.
Oh yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but those things are junk.
Nope, only during... It only covered a certain percentage, and it was during the Obama administration. It was kicked out during the Bush administration.
Obama was after Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Trump during the Trump administration, they quit it.
Well, I don't blame them, but still, not everybody has a phone.
No, not everybody has a phone. I deal with people all the time that come here, and you mean I got to use a computer? I don't even have an email address.
For simpler times.
This is now. It's not simpler times.
Yeah. But I wish I didn't need at least 3 or 4 email addresses just to do my job properly. One for personal, one is a decoy to just load scam and junk mail into, one for official work emails, and one for as an official work scam slash slash junk mail.
Junk
email. You'd be amazed
I
how
get more
useful.
junk email than I do anything.
You'd be amazed how useful it is to have an email that is specifically for just forwarding junk email to, or using as a to sign up for accounts you're required to sign up to for work, just for that to send all the junk email to that one. Of course, I also use that email for two-factor authentication so I can get into my other email if I have to switch computers.
I never have cared for two-factor.
Neither do I, but that's part of the reason why I've got like one email address that only requires one factor authentication, and because it's so low security, I can just send a bunch of scam and junk email to it, and the one that's slightly more secure, I can use one to get into the other, and it stacks on each other nicely.
I think I'm down to 2 email accounts right now.
I'd be down to 2 if it wasn't for work, which requires me to have up to 4.
I technically have 3.
Well, at one point in time, I had 4 or 5, but that's... Before we took and the house was destroyed, I took and had 3.
Did you just delete the old ones, or are they still hanging around somewhere?
No, I lost it when I took and quit with that internet provider.
Oh, okay.
So that made it. My new internet provider didn't provide an email, so.
Most don't these days. Thinking about it, even my work email, and this is probably something that I shouldn't be doing, but I set a series of custom rules in that email so that all those to whom it may concern emails that are just sent out to everybody in the complex are just immediately forwarded to the trash can. Just whoosh, gone. It clears everything up nicely.
Well, virtually everything, unless it's somebody who I've known for a long time, it goes to trash.
Being one of those hip young kids,
So
I don't get sent emails by people I know.
they can get
texting is basically just an email. They uses a number instead of a letter address.
Now, if you go into those, I've got all kinds of those accounts. Oh, and I ignore most of them. But now, when New York came out with the vaccination passport, Biden thought it was a good idea, and is trying to get it mandated nationwide.
Somehow I don't think it'll count. I don't think it'll catch on past a certain line.
So, bear with me here, because this is going to sound like I'm going around in circles for a bit. But here in Italy, they have an unemployment crisis. And their government, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that to solve this crisis, they will just create jobs. Do you know how they do this? They create a problem and then make a job as the solution to that problem. One of these problems that they have created for their own people to solve as a employment thing is to require pet passports. And these pet passports just basically give a rundown of your pet's condition, the shots and stuff that it has, and basically all of that. And it is required for travel into Italy with a pet. Another one of these problems is let's see, something they call a soggiorno. I'm mispronouncing it, but basically it's a green card. It's a work green card on top of your passport and other work green card, and something they call a codice fiscale, which is a sort of social security, not a social security number, but it works like a social security number that they issue you in Italy, and you are required to use that number to sign any contracts, whether that's a cell phone contract or a rent contract or anything in this in the country. If you don't have that, you can't sign an official contract.
Wouldn't a codice fiscale just mean fiscal code or fiscal codex?
That is exactly what it means, but it serves the same function as a social security number in the States. And they just create problems and then throw people at it to work on it. And that sounds a lot like what Biden is trying to do with this whole
you notice what the solution
vaccination passport.
The solution is always bureaucracy.
More government. Well, that's always been true with the socialists and communists. It's kind of like one of the things that stopped them from taking and putting forward the notion of the government paying everybody's student loans was the fact that they would be taxed. Because once you take and get a loan forgiven, you've essentially made the amount that loan was, and so it's taxable income. Well, now they passed a law that does away with that. And they say, so now that Biden can just go through and just with a stroke of a pen and forgive everybody's student loans. And they say there are people that are going through and complaining, well, I had to pay my loans. And they said, well, that's just not right to take and be complaining about having to pay your own loans and the government forgiving others. This is good for the economy. If you talk that way, we wouldn't have had Social Security or Medicare or other such things. And my thoughts on the matter was, but constitutionally, we're not supposed to have Social Security or Medicare or other welfare programs. They're unconstitutional.
Well, I see it a slightly different way, right? Not because I disagree with the unconstitutional thing, but let me get on with that. First of all, signing away debt. Who is taking the brunt of that? Well, obviously that would be the banks.
You and I.
In this case, it would be the banks, because the banks are required by the government to give these student loans. So since the banks are taking the hit, they will immediately go under, because that's just the raw amount of money they suddenly have lost that they have no way of recuperating. It's gone. And the banks effectively go bankrupt. Then what happens to the banks? Well, the government naturally bails them out. So then who does it hit? Well, it's the taxpayer. So taxes will skyrocket, probably by up to 30 to 40%. And on most people can't pay that.
One thing you're overlooking is the fact they're government guaranteed student loans.
Yeah.
So if the person doesn't pay them, then the government pays them. So if they're writing them off, the government is paying for them.
But that's just...
Well, the government doesn't have any money.
Yeah, but that's just it. They said it's student loan forgiveness. I don't think they had any intention of paying for these loans, because according to government decree at that point, the loans no longer exist. Yeah, so therefore, the government wouldn't have to pay for the loans, other than, of course, bailing out the banks that they just drove into bankruptcy.
Because it's been forgiven, the guarantee is gone.
Yeah. Of course, I also see it this way.
Technically, the banks to forgive it.
I don't think the government will do anything that makes it to where they suddenly can't tax that income. So I think that this is a sign that they will not forgive student loans if they suddenly can't tax them.
But they still have to placate their constituents.
They don't have to placate their constituents. They just have to crush their constituents beneath their boot heels. Because once these new voting laws come into place, doesn't matter what their constituents think.
But until the voting laws come into place, they still have to play the game.
They still have to play the game, which is why they're passing this narrative that now that it's no longer a taxable income, we can wave it away with a pen. Just wait. In the near future. That will never come.
It is true. They never do get around to forgiving student loan debts.
Ever. Yeah. And they never will.
Carrot just constantly drifting away.
Well, by right, only the banks should have the power to forgive those debts.
By right, the bank shouldn't have been required to give the loans in the first place. It's theft.
Well, that's true.
Grand larceny.
But still, it's actually extortion. But,
it is extortion.
You do it or else. But if you take and look at they owe money to this group of individuals. because that's all a bank is a group of individuals. Technically, when you borrow money from the bank, you're borrowing money from the depositors of that bank.
Mm-hmm.
So when they borrowed their student loan money from the bank, they borrowed money from the depositors of that bank. Now, the depositors of the bank have a guarantee that you will pay them X amount of money for using their money.
Yeah. If they didn't
By
have
you
that, no
not
one would ever invest
paying,
money in a bank.
you're stealing. And by you not doing it, you're stealing.
Yeah. In fact, for those of you who aren't aware, putting your money in a bank is a contract saying, I am letting the bank borrow my money. In exchange, the bank can let other people borrow my money on the promise that when it is returned, I will receive a stipend for my generosity. That is how banks work. That's why banks make a profit. That's why banks are a business rather than just a guy digging a bunch of holes in his backyard and sticking mason jars filled with dollar bills there.
Yeah. So what they're doing is saying, okay, we're going to give you permission to steal $50,000 a person from the populace of the United States.
Well, not $50,000 a person, because the entire U.S. doesn't have student loan debt.
Well, per person that has a student loan debt.
Which is
right.
a lot of people.
And that's a lot of money. Think about it. How many people go to college every year, and they're allowed to have $50,000 forgiven.
So
it would crash the economy.
On top of that,
that's
for the people who don't know what a run on a bank is. A run on a bank is when too many people try to withdraw all of their money from a bank at once. The bank, because it has been loaning that money out actively in order to receive a return on their investment in the future, does not have all of the money that has been deposited in their system on hand. Or at all in general. So they go bankrupt immediately, and they cannot return all of the money to all of the people who have deposited their money in the bank. This effectively means, by extension, those people go bankrupt. And that's exactly what this would cause. It wouldn't help the economy, it would crash the economy. Great Depression number 2 times 5.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah, but it's in the ballpark.
Because when you stop and think about it, now I grant you that most of these banks are federally insured, which means that if they go bankrupt, the federal insurance kicks in and the taxpayers pay it. Well, we're already printing trillions of dollars that doesn't exist for their giveaway programs as it is, to take and send millions of dollars to various foreign countries and stimulus checks to the citizenry. That's just more debt. And why should those who didn't take out student loans pay because other people did? And for that matter, the majority of people don't go to college at all. Why should they have to pay for the elites to go to college?
In fact, these days, a college diploma isn't worth the paper it's written on.
I actually forgot that I have a degree for a while. I just completely forgot.
To what degree?
Totally. To that degree.
Well, thing about it is that if you've got a college degree, it tells the world I can be fed information and I can regurgitate that information.
It also tells the world that I am bad at money management.
I'll have you know that I am not in debt.
Yeah, but you also got,
Neither am I.
how many scholarships?
I actually, from the college that I graduated from, I got one scholarship, but it was one really big scholarship.
Scholarship students are the exception to the rule,
A
though.
lot bigger than the scholarship
They
I
are
got
the
from when I went
minority,
there.
after all.
Yes, they are the minority.
Thing about it is, here these octogenarians and in Congress say, "Well, when I went to college, it only cost $50 a semester." It's like, why did you go to college? The Stone Age?
$50 a semester. But then again, back then, $50 was a lot.
Oh my,
And then you could take
$50 a
and pay for
semester.
your college just by working a part-time waitressing job.
You could pay entirely
Put
for
yourself through law
college
school.
for $400.
I could get that done in 2 weeks.
I could pay for the entirety of college with less than half of a paycheck. 4 years worth. Less than half of a paycheck.
Yeah. The thing about it is they were talking about that was what it cost them when they went. And the first thing that popped into my, and they said, well, that was because the government it was supporting the people by sending money to the colleges. No, it wasn't. It's because the professors weren't making $300,000 a year.
And they weren't wasting money on frivolous things like their, what do they call it? Their equity councils and such things.
Equity councils, those female studies programs.
Wait, is that a
Gender
program where
studies
they?
in general.
Wait, is that a program where they study females? Because I can imagine that would attract a lot of guys, especially those who are socially inept.
Well, there is the female literature course that Matthew went through. I believe he wrote a dissertation on it and everything.
The female studies program is basically feminism regurgitated from the classroom stage.
If they were actually doing a good faith study of females, a lot of socially inept guys would go. They need all the help they can get.
Yes, and they'd come out still not understanding them.
But they
And they'd
would
come
at
out
least
still not
try.
understanding women.
You know, I was talking to a guy a couple days ago. Well, actually, I think it was just yesterday. But I told him that in regards to public schools, not even counting college, but just in regards to public schools, I consider it a success if you come out having learned one specific thing. Basic social interaction. If you have acquired that one skill, only that one, and learned nothing else the entire 12 years you were in the public education system, it succeeded. And unfortunately, only about half the high school graduates come out with that much. Most have never
They
learned
did a
anything
study
in
recently.
public schools.
They did a study recently on feminists. And you know what they've discovered?
Apart from the fact their brain
The
chemistry is all messed
majority
up.
of feminists. Well, yeah, well, there's that. But the majority of feminists are strongly attracted to masculine men.
So what they're saying is this is a cry for help.
And
They
so
want to be put in their place.
No, they're afraid. They're afraid of rejection, and therefore they reject them first.
Ah.
Now, they would never agree with those manly men politically.
Actually, you say that, but you'd be amazed at how many feminists marry a masculine man, and give it a while, give it maybe 10 years, but they start to turn around.
Yeah, but they're no longer feminists by the end of that process.
Well, yeah, that's the point. They defeminize when they interact.
But it's a moot point that if they are agreeing with them politically, then they are no longer feminists. And if they are no longer feminists, then they do not apply to the feminists will never agree with them politically rule.
Touche. That's because they cease to exist as feminists.
Yes.
Of course, there is a growing move among feminists for self-marriage.
Ugh.
Which is not marriage, by the way.
They are the female equivalent of incels, is what they are.
I don't actually know what an incel is.
So an incel, let's just say that its implications mean more than its literal what it literally means. But what it literally means is involuntarily celibate. They are guys who cannot find any girl to like them or give them any time at all, even if they paid them. They are involuntarily celibate. There is a very large number of them.
And I'm sure it's a growing number.
Feminists are the female equivalent.
Well, of course, to quote Rush Limbaugh, feminazis are feminazis because they can't get a man. Normally because they're too homely.
That's the thing, though. There's some.
I think it's less because of I think it's less because they're too homely, and it's more because they're aiming for beyond their station. They haven't realized that as a 2, they should be aiming for 2s and not 7s and 8s.
Well,
Someone like me, for example, someone like me, for example, who is at best a 5, probably a 4, should aim for a 5 or 4. It's the way it is.
The thing about it, it's not so much. Well, I grant you, yes, there are. When it comes to hardcore feminists, there are a lot of homely women, but there are also some attractive ones, but their personalities make it where they're unattractive.
Yeah.
Personalities tie into the number system. It's part of the reason why I'm below average and not just perfectly average.
Why are you being so mean to yourself, Josh?
Because I'm a realist. And, well, I'm a pessimist. But
no, you get it? You were talking about being perfectly average. You were just being mean.
More median.
Well, you might have to switch your mode then.
It's within the range of my
Oh.
activities.
Oh.
Reminds me of a pickup line I heard once. Don't be mean, you're well above average.
When it comes down to the various things they're trying to push through Congress right now, the HR1, which would give the federal government control over the individual election rules, so that they can make sure that the Democrats win all the elections. The anti-gun laws they've got before the books that would make it where no poor person could ever afford a gun because of all the licensing and restrictions and such, which are distinctly violations of the Constitution.
A couple 3D printers can fix that issue. Make it downright affordable.
Yes.
Yeah, but 3D printers aren't cheap.
3D printers are not cheap.
That's true. 3D printers are not cheap. You'd have to sell a lot of them for, illegal ghost guns to pay for it.
Oh, but you get to sell illegal ghost guns on a markup, so...
And being you can't buy real commercially made guns, there'd be quite a market for ghost guns.
Oh, yeah.
You would be able to make a killing off of it. Assuming you've got the equipment to make them. Florida took and has a bill before their Congress that itemizes everything in these new gun laws, stating they cannot be enforced right down to the taxation in the state of Florida.
Which bumps up my opinion of Florida a few
and
notches.
Points out that
when did Florida become the bastion of freedom in the U.S.?
Florida has always
question.
Florida has always been a bastion of you can't tell me what to do.
And thing about
I'm
it is,
gonna
okay,
swim with those gators if I want.
that they're trying to push through, and crocodiles.
I'm going to eat those bath salts and then somebody's face off if I want to. That's Florida.
That was one time.
But it would require that you to be licensed to own a gun, and if you're going to transfer a gun from one person to another, like if I was going to give you a gun, you'd have to be licensed before you could receive it. It would require you to be licensed to own ammunition. It requires mental checks for everybody in your household, including yourself, and you have to pay for it. An $800 a year fee. And Florida says no. There will be no restrictions on the transferring of firearms.
But how did they keep the ATF out?
Ammunition. There'll be no taxation. It comes down to they strictly state that the FTA, if the ATF tries to enforce it, they're violating the law and can go to prison.
You're gonna arrest the feds.
Yeah. It's happened before.
Because it's not within their purview. They don't have any jurisdiction.
there's going to be a fight over that. You know that, right?
Well, there's going to be a fight anyway. All this is paving the groundwork for secession.
We've been saying for what, the last 20 episodes that there's a fight coming?
Yeah, we're just going to keep saying it over and over and over again. But let's be honest.
And I honestly believe there is a fight coming. But it's going to take a bit to sink into some people that the notion of honest elections is gone. And the court system, completely unreliable. You cannot trust the federal court system. They're in the pockets of the Democrats. Taking something to the Supreme Court's a waste of time.
They won't even see it if it's something that matters.
If it's something that matters, they won't see it. You'd be better off to just take that illegal firearm and settle a thing. Vigilante style. Because that's what happens when people finally give up on the justice system because it's too corrupt. They just take the things in their own hands, and then the people in the community cover it up.
Yeah. That's why it's part of the reason why it's so important to have a well-functioning, non-corrupt justice system. Because without it, we're going to have lynchings again. And anyone with a brain doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Well, you'd have lynchings, you'd have honor killing.
Yeah.
You'd have people taken and go in like St. Valentine's Day Massacre and take out a group of people, and then the whole community just shut up about it because they'd view the courts as the enemy.
I'm surprised the people didn't take it into their own hands and start wiping out the mobsters.
If I recall correctly, a lot of the mobsters they covered up for. A lot of them were on the side of the mobsters.
The people were generally afraid of the mobsters.
Generally, yeah. But the mobsters provided something that they wanted. In the case of the 1920s, it was alcohol.
1930s, it was drugs.
Drugs and prostitution.
Then later, it was unions. The mob can only survive as long as it provides something that the public wants. As soon as the public turns against them, it's over.
It's kind of like the serial killer, the Iceman. If people weren't paying him to kill, he wouldn't have killed anybody.
Which isn't a good defense for him, but it says a lot about human nature.
Love of money is the root of all evil.
Well, he was a mob hitman.
Well, I was more referring to the people who are willing to pay to get people killed, but that rather than the individual himself. There is no debate that the Iceman was evil. I was more referring to the people that were paying him.
Mm-hmm. But they were the mob.
Yeah.
They've had to do a lot of evacuations down in Australia because of the heavy flooding they're going.
Last year it was the fires. This year it's the flooding. Just can't get any break.
Yeah. They say that Queensland hasn't seen this kind of flood since the 80s. It's not quite as bad as the floods that were hitting China, but they're pretty bad floods. Kind of reminds me of what we got around here a couple of years ago.
I remember seeing the footage of that.
I remember remember seeing in person. It was awesome.
Rowboats down Main Street.
Not quite that awesome.
But they're getting that in Queensland. It's kind of interesting watching them try to put people in these little bitty dinky boats that really weren't meant to have that many people in them. But they're continually expanding the evacuations of the area. Natural disasters are a lot more easy to observe and to talk about than the politics, because they're not stupid.
They just are.
They just are. Well, the politicians, most of them, I think there must be a law someplace. Well, if you get elected to national office, you got to have your brain sucked out.
You didn't know about the mandatory cannot be a politician if your IQ is above 43?
No, I didn't know that. But apparently that's why Trump had such much problem. He had too high of an IQ for him.
His IQ is at least average.
But they have some of the biggest brain dead morons. But you've got volcanic eruptions in Italy. You've got flooding in
Volcanic eruptions in Iceland,
in
but nobody
Australia.
cares about that.
Well, the volcanic eruptions in Italy have settled down mostly now. Still raining ash most days, but at least the eruptions themselves have settled down.
Volcanic eruptions in Iceland.
I say, just watch. There's going to be another major eruption tomorrow.
The busiest hurricane season on record in the U.S. And we've hit tornado season, so...
And that's not even counting the sandstorms that are sweeping through China that are so devastating that they say that some of the particles are so fine they can go straight into your bloodstream.
Are they having a dust bowl?
A side note about sandstorms, actually. There is a group that I've heard about recently. I don't know their success in their current endeavor, but their intention is to create a heavily wooded area as a sort of Great Wall of Africa to stop the spread of the Sahara Desert south.
Good for them, actually.
If it works, it'll be they can actually start slowly creeping that area up and reclaiming that land.
Yeah, that'll be the landmark.
I don't know if it's going to be successful, and it's definitely going to be expensive, very expensive. But I hope it works.
Well, they've proven that to stop desertification requires cows.
Well, for cows, you need grass.
Theoretically speaking, well, they've actually figured out that the movement of cattle will halt desertification. And
actively moving them from one pasture to another, so they don't just completely destroy off the land.
And well, they don't destroy it anyway because they don't kill the roots, but they will fertilize all of that land, because basically all cows do is eat and poop.
Fair enough.
But they've actually found, and it was funny, I had heard this on a TED Talk by an environmentalist, and he very begrudgingly admitted that cows are the answer to desertification.
Well, the goal with the tree line.
Of course, people like AOC want to.
The
So
goal
people like
with
AOC want to get rid of all the cows.
the goal with a tree line is to use the roots in order to keep this topsoil in place to prevent it from blowing with the sand and then just covering up all the fertile soil and just
Well,
spreading the sand.
well, we've had Sky on the show before. He's from Kansas, which is a fairly arid state, even though it's really big for agriculture.
Yeah.
And
There's a reason
that,
why the Midwest used to be called the Great American Desert.
yeah. Well, what they do in Kansas is they do use that approach. They use the trees to catch the soil because they
Yeah.
don't want another dust bowl. And they use cattle. Though he has pointed out that any tree that is not constantly watered in Kansas will die.
That's probably going to be the biggest problem with this whole stop the spread of the Sahara Desert thing. Is that is a lot of land, and that is not a lot of water to go around.
Yeah. But theoretically, they could do it. They've proven that the Sahara was not desert at one point.
Well,
It
most
used
of
to
the
be
Sahara
forest.
Desert wasn't desert at one point.
Yeah, well, they've proven that all of the Sahara at one point wasn't desert.
There is a reason why Israel used to be called the land of milk and honey. It definitely wasn't a desert at the time.
Yeah, but they've actually been successful in their reclaiming effort. They've been fighting against the desert for a long time.
Interestingly enough, the only reason why Sicily hasn't joined the desert is because of the volcano.
Really?
Yeah. That ash that's been raining every day for the last month or so is the reason why their soil is so fertile. So despite the fact that they've got California weather, their place never just completely dries out and dies because the soil is just that good.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what the soil's like in Iceland with all those volcanic eruptions up there.
If it was ever warm enough to grow plants, I'm sure someone would find out. It's still better than Greenland, I suppose.
Well, they're always talking about how the global warming is so horrible, and yet Greenland used to be warm enough that people used to wear regular European clothes in there in Greenland, and grew sheep and cattle and.
Wow, they grew sheep. I've never, and I work with produce constantly, but I haven't seen a single sheep plant.
Not a plant.
You said they grew them.
You grow animals. Yeah, animals grow.
You raise animals.
I've seen a sheep plant. I've seen a sheep plant before, but it doesn't grow sheep so much as dismember them.
So it raises the sheep, like R-A-Z-E.
How else will you get your lamb chops?
You won't. You'll go for beef instead.
No.
Lamb doesn't taste bad, actually.
And being Antarctica used to be a tropical. They're doing everything they can to scare society to make them communists, so that people will give them power.
Well, have you ever noticed that the Great Reset, when they finally did their conference on it, focused on environmentalism? You know, that was after they made the statement of, you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. The thing about it is Biden ran on the Great Reset. And he is pushing environmentalism hard.
And it just goes to show that environmentalism is a communist ploy.
Hmm.
Well,
And as you start watching the gas prices go up,
Start watching. I already have.
environmentalists have always been radicals, and environmentalists have almost always been evil.
Well,
Anytime you start
well,
taking the life of a plant over the life of a human, you're evil. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It's the truth.
remember back in the day when it was the preservationists versus the conservationists? You ever notice how it wasn't really
mhm.
any different than now? Because who goes around saying we're gonna chop this piece of land, separate it from everything else, and no one's allowed on it? That was the preservationist argument.
Yeah.
And then there were the conservationists who were just like, okay, land is good. We should protect it. But you know we can still use it, right?
Well, that's one of the arguments that a lot of the left wants to do away with hunting, but a lot of the the wildlife wouldn't exist if it wasn't for hunters.
Oh yeah. Has anyone ever heard of the Great Emu War?
Yes.
They were actually, if I
The best war Australia has ever lost.
a lot of shots fired, but very few casualties. If you
My.
ever want a perfect example of why government intervention is a bad thing, look at the Emu War. So, for those of you who don't know, Australia during the early 1900s had a huge emu overpopulation problem. So, in order to solve it, they went to some American soldiers and said, hey, we will pay, well, I think it was an American and a British soldier, and said, hey, we will pay you to wipe out these emus. And they were like, great. Got their machine guns and went to Australia. And the machine guns jammed.
Worse than
And
that, the emus themselves were able to take. The emus, for one thing, they had pack tactics for surviving predators, which made it to where they were harder to wipe out in groups because they would scatter whenever they were fired on, and they're surprisingly durable and could take multiple shots each and never go down.
so what they ended up after they tried, I believe, 3 times. Those two people did to wipe out the emus and failed every single time. So what they ended up doing to solve the problem is they put a bounty on the emus and let the Australian hunters do their thing. And you know what happened? The overpopulation problem went away.
Well, two things happened. One, the overpopulation problem was handled by the locals, and two, people started raising emus in order to turn in for the bounty.
And yes, there is still a domesticated emu industry.
Their meat is supposed to be very good for you. And emu oil is used in a lot of different pharmaceuticals.
In fact, the second reason there is the reason why in Louisiana and East Texas there is just open season on wild hogs year round. Because if they put a bounty on it, people would start gathering them up and raising them to slaughter and then bring in for the money.
But with the open season, people are more incentivized to kill them. Yeah.
Yeah. The trick is to incentivize it
There's a
just
bounty.
enough, not too much.
There was a bounty in Louisiana on swamp rats. To collect the bounty, you had to bring in tails of the tail of the swamp rat. And so people took it, flooded through the swamps in flat-bottom boats with guns and to hunt these rats. Because the rats would eat the roots that were supporting that was preventing erosion. I haven't really heard of any of how successful it's been because rats really breed fast, but I haven't heard about a problem with swamp rats in a while.
So I would say that if ever you want a large group of people to do something, to perform a task, you must always remember two things. One, mankind as a whole, not as individuals, are far more clever than you give them credit for. And two, mankind as a whole is lazy. They will put the minimum amount of effort to get the maximum result in. As long as you account for those two things, you can more effectively get whatever you need done.
No, they have not been. The bounty has not successfully gotten rid of the pythons in Florida, though.
No, sheer terror is helping get rid of the pythons in Florida.
I hear there's been a resurgence of Florida Panthers recently, and not just the football team. I mean, literal Florida Panthers.
Which are just mountain lions.
They're a type of panther. Yeah.
Yeah, but Florida Panthers literally just another day for mountain
Yeah.
Mountain lions have a lot of different names.
Yeah. Mountain lion, cougar, Florida panther. Lynx, I think, is one of them.
No, Lynx is different.
Lynx
is a smaller cat.
Bobcat is one of them.
Nope, Bobcat's a different cat too.
It's a type of mountain lion, just a different type of mountain lion.
They have a bobtail. Mountain lions don't.
Still a mountain lion, just a different type of mountain lion.
No, it's a mountain domesticated cat.
What, are you saying it's a mountain tiger now?
but they look like domesticated cats with a bobtail, and are bigger.
They look more like a small saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, if you liked today's episode, feel free to hit the like button. If you disliked it, then feel free to dislike it. We don't care either way. Also, feel free to describe this episode to your friends and subscribe while you're at it. And feel free to leave the name of your favorite potted meat in the description down below.
And be sure to turn in your water rat tails.
For those of you who don't know, mine's not spam. Until then, see you next time.